Good afternoon. Oh, hey y'all. Good afternoon. Okay, that's a little better. This is going to be a discussion, so we need a little energy. My name is Trina Green Brown. I'm the founder of Parenting for Liberation. Woo, woo. I want to welcome you to the Underground Museum. Let's give it up for Underground for hosting us for this lovely event. Want to also shout out the co-host of this event, Loom, as well. You'll be hearing from Loom's leader, Erica. She's moderating the panel. And I just wanted to welcome you all to this gathering. It's a little turned up here already, so let me not hold you up. Just wanted to share a little bit about how Parenting for Liberation is. Ooh, all the questions blew away. That means you got to do it from your heart. So excited to be here with none other than Danny Mclean and Adrienne Marie Brown, incredible authors of We Live for the We, the political power of Black motherhood. Did I say it wrong?
No, that's a great way to say it. That's the right.
Okay. That's the title that I'm saying from my heart. My heart knows that it's about our power as Black mothers, okay? Okay. And Audrey Lorde Brown, the author of Pleasure Activism, The Politic of Feeling Good. That's right. I got that right. Please. I got it? Okay. All right. So we politicking on Black mothering and on feeling good. All right. I don't have my notes either. They blew away. So this is what happens. Just really want to welcome you folks here and tell you a little bit about Parenting for Liberation and what this panel is up to. We're really going to be talking about the intersections of parenting, mothering, and pleasure. So I was letting folks know, like, get ready to talk about pleasure and how do you bring aliveness to your own self and your own lives. Oftentimes as mothers, caregivers, folks who are taking care of other folks, we spend a lot of time making sure our other folks are well, are fed, are taken care of, and we sometimes neglect ourselves. We sometimes don't put ourselves at the center, and we know that when we also have our own pleasure and our own aliveness, that we can be the best parents and caregivers for the future. And so I just really want to make sure that while we're here, we ground in that sense of ourselves. And so you're taking the time right now, right here, to lean into yourselves and your own being. And I want to invite us first to ground. So if folks can ground yourselves, whether that's your bum on the floor, or whether that's your eyes closed or your gaze lowered, just really wanting you to get in touch with yourself. And even if that's a giggly get in touch with yourself, that's all welcome. I hear all the giggles. I'm just inviting folks to breathe deeply into themselves. So let's take some deep inhales together. And some exhales. Breathing in coolness and exhaling our fire. Bringing in the possibilities of what's possible in this space with one another. Inhale that. Letting go of all worries. Grounding in our ancestors. Breathing in their power, their strength, and their resilience that brought us here today. Breathing in joy and happiness and aliveness in our lives. And exhaling anything that gets in the way of our joy and our power. Yeah? And you can open your eyes if they were closed and bring your attention back up here. And I'm going to get my notes so that I don't say crazy things. Maybe not too many crazy things, but totally some crazy things. Yeah. The birds are chirping because they're here with us. I also want to shout out and give acknowledgments to the folks who made this possible who are not up here. So I want to honor Nandi, who's a part of the coordinating committee, and Chaco, thank you, for holding space for us and making this possible. You, yes, you, right here in the front. Yeah. They're going to talk about her a lot. Great. And I also just want to open us up with a quote that Danny uses to open her book, and also something that we have in common in terms of parenting, by the great Audrey Lorde, who grounds both of their work and all of our work, that raising children in a racist, raising black children explicitly, in the mouth of a racist suicidal dragon is perilous and chancy. If they cannot love and resist, they probably will not survive. So this work is resistance work that's rooted in love and our own pleasure and our own possibilities. So Audrey Lorde, who's a black queer feminist poet and scholar, describes parenting as a revolutionary act that can liberate not only her children, but all of our children. And Parenting for Liberation believes in the power of parents to conceive, birth, and nurture liberation for the future. And I launched Parenting for Liberation in 2016, and around that time, I was parenting from fear because I was witnessing the violence that was happening against black bodies and witnessing so much violence, whether it be black boys being murdered for wearing a hoodie, Trayvon Martin, or for listening to rap music or loud music, Jordan Davis, or just walking down the street, Emmett Till, or playing with a toy in a park, Tamir Rice. I realized that when I witnessed those violences that were happening and learned of them, that I was beginning to parent for protection and fear and not for love and liberation. And I saw that I was beginning to nurture my own son's fear that he couldn't do things that he was afraid that he was able to do. And I didn't want to limit his possibilities, and so I knew I had to shift how I was parenting to parent not for protection only, but to parent for liberation. And so that work is rooted in an Afrofuturistic vision where black parents are in community together. And so it's just incredible to see folks here together in community, because this is what is the pathway to our own collective liberation, is to create community that amplifies black girl magic and black boy joy. And so part of that work has gotten me connected to Danny. Danny has been an incredible partner in the work about raising liberated black children and having those conversations. And also that work has brought me to Adrian, who is an incredible son. Did you say son? I was like, son, you are the sun. You also are a mermaid and a unicorn, all of the things. I was like, you're the sun? Okay. You can be all that. It is Adrian who is beaming down on you right now. Adrian the sun. So I'm gonna stop talking. Adrian gives me the giggles. Adrian's all things magical. So yes, including the sun. And I just want to also turn this to Erica, who's going to talk to them about their incredible works, and how parenting is rooted in our own pleasure. Okay, I'm passing the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Trina. Well, welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Erica Chitty Cohen, and I am the co-founder, CEO of Loom. And for those that might not know about Loom, Loom is here in LA. We provide empowered education from periods to parenting. We see reproduction and the reproductive experience as a continuum. So it's actually a really beautiful thing to be here today talking about the intersection of pleasure and parenting, because we really feel that those two things are deeply interconnected, and also looking at it from the experience of Black women and Black people, I think, is extremely powerful. So excited to kind of dive in there. About me, I also am a doula. I am an educator. I'm an author. So it's very wonderful to be in the presence of other women who look like me and who are also doing work in similar spaces. Before I go into my questions, the first thing I want to do actually is because I'm a nerd, I have my little oh fish bios, just in case y'all don't know everything about these two incredible women sitting to my left and to my right. Danny Mclean is the author of We Live for the We, The Political Power of Black Motherhood. She also reports on race and reproductive health. She's a contributing writer at The Nation and a fellow with Type Media Center, formerly known as the Nation Institute. Mclean's writing has appeared in outlets including Slate, Talking Points Memo, Color Lines, Ebony.com, and The Rumpus. She was a staff reporter at the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel and has worked as a strategist with organizations including Color of Change and the Drug Policy Alliance. And she lives with her family in Cincinnati. And then to my right, we have Adrienne Marie Brown. She is a Detroit-based social justice facilitator focused on Black liberation, a doula, healer, and pleasure activist. Adrienne is the co-editor of Octavia's Brood, Science Fiction from Social Justice Movements, and the author of Pleasure Activism, The Politics of Feeling Good, and Emergent Strategy, Shaping Change, Changing Worlds.
Yeah.
Correct. Let's just dive into it. My first question is basically based around the fact that I wanted to honor the power of Black friendship. And for those of you that don't know, Danny and Adrienne have been friends for many, many years. And so I'd love for you both to share a little bit about how you met and what your favorite thing is about one another.
Can I go? So Danny and I went to college together at Columbia University, and we met basically because I saw Danny. You had been walking around. Danny was always as like the super fly human being, and I saw her walking around. She had just cut all her hair off, and I was like, "What? Who is this person? Like, you just look like the most free being that I had ever met." And so I just like flocked towards her, and I remember standing like on Barnard, like we were trying to go to some class, and being like. Basically in my heart, I was like, will you be my friend? But like trying to figure out like other ways to say like hi or whatever. And throughout college and throughout to this day, I would say the thing I think is my favorite thing about Danny is she's always been like the sharpest knife in the drawer. Like she's the one who's like cutting through like there's a bunch of bullshit, there's a bunch of stuff that's being said. And in my life, there's a lot of I operate in a lot of magical, fantastical realms, and I meet a lot of magical, fantastical people, and there's a lot of magical, fantastical, like, yay, like, you know, and Danny's just like, okay, but for real, I'm down for the magic and the fantasy, but how for real are we going to get there? Like, what's that really mean? Or just, like, cuts through in a way that keeps me, like, we're going to actually be able to change reality because of that dynamic to me. So I love being around you, and my other favorite thing is how she parents. I feel like it's a long time coming, and it was like beautiful to be like, you really want to do this, and I really, it's changed I'm like, oh, only people who really want to do it like this should be doing it, because the love that her child receives is like unparalleled, and she knows it. Like she just walks around like, I am loved. Where's my next loving interaction coming from? So all of that is some of my stuff about Danny. And I also want to shout out, we have some other folks that we went to school with here in the front row and throughout the audience. Tanji, Chaiko, Aaron, others. So just Ning. Yes, and Ning. Where'd Ning go? I was like, were you not up here? Okay, there you are. Yay. Yeah, right? Reunion. Anyway, some things.
I love that. Thank you, Adrienne. Yeah. And y'all will probably experience my little one, Isabel. She's around here somewhere, so she might come up to you hoping for a loving interaction at some point. Well, I just want to thank everybody for being here. This is such an incredible crowd. Thank you for taking time out of your Sunday to come sit in the warmth and fellowship and be in conversation with us. Thank you. Let's see. So I don't remember like an exact moment when we met. I trust you on that Barnard connection with the haircut.
It's because I was nerding out, and you were just like, why are you talking to me?
But I know we met really early in our college career, like probably like maybe halfway through our freshman year. And I just remember it was like, I've had, you know, I feel like this is such a blessing when you have a friendship and you just like get that excitement, that feeling, like when you have a crush on someone, you know, because that's what it is. It's a friendship crush. And I just remember meeting Adrienne and feeling like this is such a kindred spirit. I'm so lucky to have met this person. And then next thing I know, we're like in Prague on like a ridiculous adventure. We just immediately jumped into adventures from the start. And we worked on a literary magazine together called Roots and Culture, which was, I think of that as being really a jumping off point for a lot of the writing and the publishing that we've done in our careers, because it gave us an opportunity to produce this literary magazine together, along with people like Janine de Novage and Daniel Alarcon, who's now Daniel is a very well-respected novelist and journalist. So we got to strengthen our skills together. And I mean, there's so many things I love about Adrienne, but I would say one thing that she does that I so appreciate is that she helps me hold myself to a high standard. She never, whenever I've got myself in a bind, whether it be with like work or a relationship or something, and I'm showing a little bit of unhappiness, she's like, girl, like, you deserve better than this, you know? You can have better if that's what you want. And she holds herself to a high standard in her life, and I really learn from that, because sometimes it can be easy to get comfortable and think this is enough. But when you watch someone who's just like constantly, what's next, you know, setting off for that next, not just accomplishment in the world's eyes, but what's really going to fulfill her heart's desire, I find that very inspiring.
I love you.
Love you too.
That's such a nice way to start this off. Beautiful. Okay, so Danny, with white supremacy dictating the dominant culture, you know, we're just going.
Let's go there.
You see why I was like, let's just lay it.
So y'all
let's
friends, white people.
Yes. I was like, let's love up and then let's go in. Okay, so. So Danny, with white supremacy dictating the dominant culture, many people wouldn't make an immediate connection between Black motherhood and political power. Can you explain the intrinsic link between them and how your book can be used as a modern handbook for mothering?
For me. So it's really, you know, you have 8 chapters, and then the final chapter is the one that's, as I said, the most explicitly political. What I wanted to do was to show the politics in the everyday. The politics in our everyday decision making. So if I'm, you know, there's a part of the book where I'm like taking my daughter to this Mommy and Me program, this toddler program, and I'm watching, we're one of the only Black family in the class, and so I'm watching, you know, toddlers don't have good manners, they don't have good sense, so they're like stealing things from each other, or, you know, they don't know how to share and causing tantrums and stuff, and I'm aware of the way that as a Black parent, I'm like, nervous for my daughter. What's going to happen if she hits this little boy, if she pinches this little white boy? And noticing my reaction to these scenarios that are really just part of our everyday lives as parents. There's a question of power in that. Who has power? Why do they have that power? How are they going to exert it? And I think over and over again through the book, I'm trying to lift up these moments that I think for some parents, they're not even thinking about these kind of overarching structures that affect who they are, who their children are. They're just like, you know, at the grocery store, or their child is falling out, having a tantrum in the mall, and they're not worried like, oh, if I spank my child, is someone going to call CPS on me? Is someone going to call Child Protective Services? Or if I let my child while out, is someone going to call the police and say that here's like this unruly situation? So that's kind of what I was getting at. I think a lot of people mistakenly, when they hear politics, they think of electoral politics, and I was very clear that that's not what I'm talking about here. And some of the highest praise that I've gotten from Black people who have read the book is like, wow, you really just took the things that we always do and that we've always done and articulated it as a politic, as a politics of parenting. So that's what I was going for.
Wonderful. So, Adrian, a similar question for you. The subtitle of your book is The Politics of Feeling Good. What are some of the political barriers when it comes to pleasure, and why do you feel that joy can truly be an act of resistance?
I feel like, I mean, it's actually pretty similar. You know, like a lot of it is very similar to me. I feel like the barrier is that we're not taught to think about our daily lives and our normal lives as the place where politics unfolds and happens. So it's kind of like we're socialized to think, oh, politics happens every 4 years when we participate in this electoral bullshit of a process, you know, what I feel. And I've done electoral organizing, and I think you all should vote. And also, it's a bullshit process. Like, we're just kind of holding off the... it's kind of like holding the ignorance at bay as much as we can while we figure out what we actually need to cultivate with each other. And I feel like we do that, and we've kept each other alive in all these ways. But pleasure was an interesting choice to me in this moment, because I felt kind of guilty even being like pursuing this book and moving in the direction of this book, because it feels like it's apolitical. Like you either are being a political organizer who is completely sacrificing everything to fight against everything, or you're, you know, taking a bath and doing a face mask. You're probably fragile. You can't handle life, right? And it's like those two things don't go together. And as a facilitator, what I was seeing was like, people are working themselves to a level of fragility that we're not going to survive if the people who are trying to change the world are constantly that fragile because we're not attending to ourselves as pleasure bodies. So that felt important. And then the other piece is like, who gets to experience pleasure is really interesting to me, and like how we've been trained out of it. I'm like, if you think about the journey as a Black woman, a mixed race Black woman in this country, when I think about like, oh, if I just trace my ancestral line in this country, what were we told our bodies were for? And it's a devastating answer. It's like, oh, my body was for working, my body was for laboring, my body was for reproducing for other people, my body was for repressing grief. My body was for repressing my actual desires and being obedient. And like every answer was like, that's not something I want to perpetuate into a future. I don't think that's going to create the futures we want. And reading Audrey Lorde's text over and over again, like that's one thing about me. I feel like probably a lot of people read, like there's people who read in lots of different ways. And I find that as I get older, like I don't read the widest swath of everything that's out there. I go in really precisely into certain texts, and then I just keep reading them over and over again in almost like a biblical approach. So Octavia Butler for me, I'm like, I've just read it over and over again. Like there's more here. And Audrey Lorde's uses of the erotic as power was like that, where I was like, the first few times I read it, I was like, I don't even think I understand this. I think it's going way over my head, but it's also reverberating down into like parts of it. I'm like, what? I want to know what she means. I want to know what she means that any political experience could be as good as being naked in a bed with her woman lover. I'm like, well,
How?
for real? Like teach me, because I'm out here suffering. So I feel like those two things come together for me, that I started to look around me and realize that the white people in my life, even if they were organizers, the white people in my life tend to have much more access to just the basic assumption that they deserve pleasure in their lives. And then those of us who are Black, people of color, indigenous, all these other things, trans people, all these other folks who are already harboring oppression also believe that our purpose in life is to just get free and not necessarily experience any pleasure along the way. And the last thing I'll say about it is what we produce when we're just trying to fight for freedom and not attending to the fact that we have bodies that feel sensation is often just a reproduction of the current system, but it's just like, oh, we're in charge now. So I also see that, like I facilitate organizations often where I'll get there and I'm like, we were trying to fight for liberation, but now it feels exactly like every other thing, but there's just a Black person in charge who's miserable or something else, right? So there started to be where do we actually practice the society we want to live into, and how do we learn to listen to our body? And pleasure, to me, that's the main purpose of pleasure, is that once you start to feel pleasure and you can feel it all through you, it means you've also opened up access to be able to feel everything. And it's a way you open up access to your intuition, open up access to authentic relationship. And I want a politics of authentic relationship where we currently have a politics of bullshit and lies and corruption. And so I want to practice that with everyone.
How can mothers combat the cultural restrictiveness of motherhood and cultivate sensuality and pleasure? And Danny, because y'all are boos or woes, how have you...
One of those.
One of those two things. How have you found ways to cultivate your own pleasure body while mothering your daughter? So y'all can just jump, but please.
As a parent of a young child, and I'm a single mom. Every time I say single mom, my fingers fly up into air quotes because I think it's just not correct language. I mean, I don't do it by myself. I do it with a lot of support from my friends and my family. But I'm an unpartnered mother, and my child and I live in the home, the two of us. And there's a lot of stress. It's tough, there's a lot to be done. It's not coal mining. It's not but it's hard work, and I'm underslept a lot, and there's a lot that I'm juggling. And so I've been thinking just about the importance of having my basic needs met before I can really think too much about before I can spend a lot of my time and attention focusing again on my pleasure, which before I was a mom, that was what I was doing. I was working and seeking out pleasure, pleasurable experiences. And so it's something that I've been thinking about a lot, because I think it can be tempting to place a lot of pressure on ourselves, like, well, how do I start dating again, or I need to like figure out my relationship to drugs, because I used to really enjoy ecstasy and mushrooms and cannabis and like different experiences of altering my mind. And so I think for me, it's been this process of realizing that there's time, that I don't have to figure it all out immediately, that my primary job that I care about right now is building a strong relationship with my child and getting us on the right track and having a foundation there, and that there will be time to figure out, to kind of come back into myself and into the parts of my life that were really important to me before I became a mom.
I would say I really appreciate that, because I also think talking about the pleasure activism book has been so illuminating to me that every time I say pleasure or pleasure activism to people, they jump to sex dungeons, right? Like we're all on mushrooms in a sex dungeon, right? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, if that's your pleasure, if that's the number one only way that you can get it, then you should run to that dungeon and take all the drugs there. But, it's not like the thing I think of as peak luxury conditions, right? It's not like we're like, oh, in a fancy hotel somewhere getting a massage every day. And no, it's like sleeping on the floor, like taking care of a baby a lot. And like, it's chill. And I'm so content. Yeah. And I feel deeply satisfied. Like, I'm like, we just made the shit out of these sandwiches. They're tasty. Like, it's the simple pleasures. Like, we just looked at dolphins. They're miraculous. Like, it's not like Orgasmville. It's like we're just like having good life. Yeah. And so that, when it comes to talking to moms, a lot of what I feel like is important is actually being in relationship with, like, are you okay? Are you feeling content? And there's a different kind of miraculous, delirious contentment that comes with motherhood and parenting that I get to tap into. And I'm very lucky because I ride very close to the people in my life who are mothers. And so I got to go through this with my sister, where I got to see, like, the contentment of, with my youngest nibbling, when she was born, I was her doula. We did a home birth. And I got to watch her come into the world. And then they live out in the middle of the woods. And it was a fire. It was like a wood fire stove. And I got this contentment. Like, I was in charge of waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning and loading the wood into that fire. And so I just had to be up, get the fire going, and pray and talk to ancestors and think. And like, but it was like, I've never, there's not a contentment that's come quite close to that one. And each one gets to be its own distinct contentment. And so I will say this. I do think it's really important to have communities that cross the line between those with parents and those without. And I think something I always get sad about is seeing how quickly it segregates, so that the parents are like just with each other. And not to say parents can't cultivate joy amongst each other, but I think that sometimes what can happen then is like, and I've been around space where it's like it's all parents and they're just like, here's how hard things are. And like, it helps to sometimes come in and be like, I also want to inject some pleasure into this moment, or reflect what I'm seeing, the beauty of this moment as a person who doesn't have kids, or get to hold the kids and give parent time, like quiet time to be like, I'm going to walk her down to the beach. You get 20 minutes. Do you know what I'm saying? So I feel like it's important to continuously build spaces and stay in connection with our friends who are like, I know you have a new kid, and I always tell people this: if you don't have a kid and you're visiting someone who has a kid, one of the things you can do to increase that person's pleasure is do the dishes, right? Or sweep the floor, or be like, can I do your laundry for you? And it's intimate, right? So a lot of times the person will say no the first time because they're like, oh, no, like, you're here, whatever it is, if they're trying to be nice mama. But like, then if you just push back, or you just start doing it, right? I've also done that a lot of times where I'll just come in and I'll be like, the laundry looks full. Like, let me go do that real quick, But I feel like that, just like being like, how can I give you 10 more minutes of life,
I really appreciate just one thing. Thank you for because I was going down the sex, drugs rabbit hole.
I can't wait till you come back to the sex,
me too,
drugs.
girl, me too. Me
We are waiting.
too.
We are patiently waiting. We've got it all lined up.
I can't wait. But also, yes, there is great pleasure. We are on our Woes vacation right now, and there's great pleasure in just being with my friends. Just watching Queen Sugar together and being like, no, what?
We're like, Chaiko, where are we going with this?
Yeah,
okay.
Chaiko, anxiously awaiting Chaiko's episode.
It better be better than this. Okay.
I think one thing I have done to try to increase just the enjoyability of my life is making time for my friends and
Yeah,
just letting
me
y'all
too.
like, okay, I have to, like Jody will say, Jody is here someplace, she's with my
She's
daughter.
taking care of the baby.
Jody Tanita. Hey, I have to do I have to do a work thing in DC. Is it okay if I stop by Cincinnati on my way back to LA? Of course. Just
Yeah.
opening my home to my friends so they know you are constantly welcome. And
Yeah.
also, the reason that I live in Cincinnati with my daughter is because that's where my mom is, and she gives us so much support. That's where my daughter's paternal grandparents are too, and they give us a lot of support. So living by family has been a way that I have tried to ensure my continued pleasure, because I'm not doing it all by myself.
That's
I
right.
don't understand. We've talked about, the kind of craziness around thinking that two people are going to take care of a child,
Yeah.
let alone one person. Like, I just don't believe, even if I were partnered, I couldn't do family like that. I need my people around me to support. So that has been really important in making
Yeah.
sure that I still have fun in this life,
Yeah.
is having adult support for my
And
child.
the chores
me.
and all that stuff. I mean, it does. I'll just say the last thing
No,
on
no,
it, like,
I wanted
or
to-
a thing on it is, it feels like it's also like the communities that we are moving towards. Like, I'm always trying to be like, where are we trying to get to? And like, where are we now? Where are we trying to get to? And all the places that I think of trying to get towards require a different level of intimacy and interdependence. Yeah. And I think that when people have kids, that's actually when the door is almost the widest open for like just learning how to receive help in a different way, right?
Also, would you mind sharing, for anyone who doesn't really know, what is reproductive justice? Like, what is that framework?
In terms of describing the framework that I think was really helpful to me,
Yeah.
is that reproductive justice is a human rights framework that advances the right to have a child, the right to not have a child, and the right to parent the children that we do have in safe and healthy communities.
Yeah.
So often when we think about, reproductive rights is very narrowly focused on contraception and abortion.
Uh-huh.
Very important, but that really just takes into account our right to not have a child.
Yep.
But when we do want to have a child, this is where what Adrienne just said comes in. Okay, but what kind of communities do we live in?
Yeah.
Do we have to worry about police violence? Do we have to worry about the schools that our children
Yeah.
are going to attend? Do we have to worry about getting them, good, affordable health care? It's like you don't just have a child in a vacuum. There are all these social forces that affect how well we're going to be able to raise them up.
Yeah, and I would say, like, almost every time you hear the word justice attached to something, what they're saying really is, we live in a complex, intersected world. No one actually lives in these little tiny vacuums or silos of issues or any of that. So can we stop fucking around on that and like look at whole systems and think in whole systems and think of whole lives and whole communities? I'll say, as a doula, the interesting thing for me, I came into doula in a non-traditional path, or a very traditional path perhaps, is that I wasn't trying to be a doula. People kept asking me to do it. I was like, I don't like blood. Or tearing vaginas or any of that kind of stuff. It's not my thing. And I hadn't had a child, and I thought you really needed to have one of those things. It had to be in order. And then someone got carjacked behind my house when I lived in Oakland, and I was like the first person to be there with the woman who had gotten carjacked, who saved her own life by screaming out for help. And she was covered in blood, and I was able to like be present with her. Like, the blood didn't matter. It was like, oh, I was like, I could do birth. Like, that would be less traumatic than this horrible thing that just happened. It's not. It's like all the things, right? It's all the things. So, but I found this woman, Cynthia Jackson, who is a Detroit-based home birth midwife now. And she was like, I'll apprentice you. Like, come with me on my births, and then I'll show up for yours. And so I never went to any program. I didn't do the certification process. And I didn't do the sort of professionalization process. And I think it's been an interesting thing for my journey, because the way that I learned it from Cynthia was like, this is what we always used to do. This is what we all used to know how to do, especially all the women in the community used to just be like, okay, now it's you, now it's me, we would just take turns taking care of each other. And I think the professionalization of it in one way is part of the problem, right? Is that it's like, it moves it out away from what people think all of us should have access to and all of us should know how to do for each other, which is just, oh, you're having a kid. Like, let's organize ourselves around what you need to be eating, how you need to be in your body, what kind of music do you need to be listening to, what are the vibes that are going to bring this baby in a peaceful way, what is the reality we need to face, like all the things. And so that's how I started doing it. And initially, for the first 5 years of my doula work, I focused on working with women under the age of 23 in Detroit. And it was very interesting to me, because I think a lot of what I see, at least what I saw happening in Detroit, was like the issues were coming up because Black women were having very different sets of values from what their families had, and they weren't being supported by their families to have the kind of birth, labor, and child-raising experiences they wanted to have. Two of the young women I worked with they'd gotten pregnant at 16 and 18 years old. Their families were not, they were like, we're not supportive. We want you to not do this. And the fact that they were continuing to have the baby. So it was like trying to just move in and be like, I'm going to walk with you through this horrible experience. And I feel like for both of them, I'm not sure that they would have made it themselves or made it through the postpartum depression of trying to raise a child where your family thinks that they have some say over how your respect levels, right? Like they're just like, we're not gonna, you don't know anything about raising a child. It's like throughout history, people have raised children at all kinds of different ages. And one of the things we can find out is when someone has a child, they very quickly adapt and figure out how to be with that child. And then it's about what are they exposed to? So I felt like my job as a doula has always been like, can I expose you to as many options as possible so that you know, can I use my education level? Because I don't know it because I am a mom. I know it because I'm a good auntie. I pay attention. And because I've been exposed to it. I was like, do you know you can refuse these vaccinations? It's an option. Do you know why people might do that? Or you can say yes to them. Make it an intentional choice. It's going into your child's body. You want to make sure you know what's happening, right? All this stuff. Or Pitocin. Pitocin has been like, you know, that's like, are there other doulas in the house? Other folks? And have any of you doulaed in the hospital? Yeah? That is the number one. I feel like Pitocin is the number one thing that you're in the hospital being like, please don't. No, right? Like I've had doctors sneak in and start bagging up someone on Pitocin when I went to the bathroom, right?
Well, it's so interesting that the conversation around Pitocin because you and I are similar doula work before having children or never having children, whatever, and bringing in the education to help people make better decisions. But what's fascinating to me is irrespective of race, class, anything, people know so little about the process.
That's it.
And know so little also about the medicine. It's like when we think about Pitocin has such a bad rap, but Pitocin actually can be titrated, which means it can be put higher, put lower.
Exactly.
It can be turned off.
But only if you know you have the options, right?
Exactly.
And it's also, I think about who gets served by us being so ignorant. And that, like when I was with the women that I've worked with, most of them, I'm like, oh, this doctor is trying to do this as quickly as possible so that they can get on and get as many people as possible through. They're not taking this person seriously. And I'm like, anything, if you make the choice, I'm pro any, like I say, any birth where you and the mom are happy and you're healthy and you're alive, that's a good birth.
Exactly.
Right? And I'll say that in the past few years, I've backed away from doing the intense level of doula work that I was doing. And mostly now I've been doing aftercare work. Like, and I love postpartum doula work. Like, that's what we did. I've gotten to do that basically one a year for the past few years where I show up and I'm like, okay, now you need more than just the two of y'all to get through this period. And I think a lot of postpartum depression actually comes from folks having their child and then immediately the individualization of our society means like, oh, everyone says like, we know this is so hard, but they don't stay the night.
No one's,
Do you know what I'm
no
saying?
no one's coming over.
And they're like, well, bitch, hold my back. Like, can you help me push stuff out of my boob? Like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Can you hold my boob?
Can you hold my boob? I've been holding boobs, okay? But also, like, there's really hard stuff that no one tells you about, too, like breastfeeding. I don't know. I just feel like there's so many pieces that it's like, it's not romantic. It's not beautiful. No. It's beautiful, but not in the way you think.
It is, yeah.
And there's so much that's hard. And the thing that I'm really curious about is the relationship between postpartum depression, child mortality. Like, these things where I'm like, the state of the mother is the state of the family, right? Like, that's how the family's going to be. And how do we show up and get intimate in those places of support?
100%.